You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and sidemount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Joining us on the show today is Sidemount instructor, trainer, and cave explorer Garry Dallas. Garry runs Simply Sidemount and Simply Tech out of the UK and is the co-owner and director of training for Raid UK and Malta. Garry, welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Hi, Steve. How you doing?
I'm sure many, if not most, of our listeners know or have heard of you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your background in diving?
Well, what's more to say, I love diving. And even more so, I love diving Sidemount. I had to put a twin set on my back the other day and it almost killed me. But no, I love it anyway. It's still getting in the water. It's my recluse. Even though I'm teaching, it still gets me away from that horribleness above water that not many of us like that much. And I get paid for it as well, so it's even better.
Yeah. You talk about Sidemount versus backmount. What made you choose Sidemount over backmount? I
did all my training in backmount. I dived backmount twins beforehand, for like people do. They try it and they experience it, and I did all my training right up to trimix level, and then later did my instructor training level and did it all in backmount. And part of the reason was because they couldn't teach me anything about Sidemount that actually meant anything. So, and all due respect to the guys, they did a wonderful job. I hold them in very high regard. But when it came to the Sidemount option for trimix, it really needed to be a personal thing, as Sidemount is, and make sure they actually did what I wanted it to do. And it did. So I can continue diving Sidemount rather than a pair of twins on my back, and continue doing it. Pull backs, they don't like that much weight, so right. You have to give into it at some point. Yeah. But thankfully, I did when I did, and I can continue diving for the rest of my days in Sidemount comfortably, happily, without putting myself in any undue stress.
Yeah, there's a school of thought out there that says that Sidemount should only be used in caves or mine sumps where you need to pass a restriction, versus what people like you and I do, where we dive it everywhere and we're diving the configuration rather than choosing a tool. What would you say to that? The people that say, "Hey, it's no good for boat diving. You're better in backmount and open water." How do you feel about that?
Oh, well, I must do a hell of a lot of cave dives every day in all these silly little quarries. So the concept for me was initially to stop hurting myself when I fell over some slippery rocks getting out from ashore. And there must have been an easier way than getting that twin set 20, 30 meters from in water to get it back onto shore without slipping, doing a collarbone in or breaking an elbow or just really hurting myself. So yes, it is nothing new. It's been around for a long time, and it served its purpose for what it was meant for in caves, and it still does. So the thing is, well, if you're diving a configuration that makes your accessibility and keeps you balanced, better balanced, should I say, because in a twin set you can be nicely balanced. Although there does come a point, depending on whether you're diving steels or alleys, will upset that balance a little bit too much, especially when we're in a dry suit. We haven't just got weight to consider, we've got the buoyancy aspect and where that buoyancy lies, whether it be in a wing or a wing and a dry suit, or maybe just your dry suit. I do remember seeing Rick Stanton in a cave in Florida, just about to go for a dive with us, and well, not with me, but with another group that was with us. And he turned up and he said, "What do you think of my rig?" We looked at it and went, "Where's your wing?" A nice, beautiful twin set, lovely harness, lovely dry suit, but no wing. And you've got to consider when you're teaching newbies, or whether you're teaching somebody who's been doing it a long time, or you're just diving with somebody who's been diving a long time, whether a certain part of that equipment's necessary and where you're going to use it. It's no good putting a twin set on your back if you can't reach the valves.
Sure.
You can't go deeper or longer into a dive and find that the stuff's hit the fan and I can't do anything about it, no matter how hard I try. And a lot of people, unfortunately, do courses in nice warm water, in wetsuits or thin undersuits and a dry suit. And they come to the UK and it gets colder and it gets colder. And then suddenly they try to reach that valve and the suit just won't let them. Now, clearly you can change your suit, but that's quite an expensive job. So maybe it's a little bit of extra physio work on your arm, stretching exercises and things like that you can do. But it's also down to your trim. And, at the end of the day, if any one of those things, those little things suffers, the whole thing suffers. And then you can't reach your valves. So in open water, is the accessibility of side mount a viable option? Hell yeah, definitely. I can reach my valves, no problem. But I don't want to dive with somebody that can't reach their valves. And this is where people come to me for training. And it's not the back injuries or anything all the time. It's about the accessibility when they actually realise that accessing those valves was a little bit more difficult. So yeah, it was good for cave diving. It is still good for cave diving. It's for getting in those nice little neat cracks in the wall. But fundamentally, it's a safer way to dive if you cannot reach your valves, period.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. When you look at side mount diving, what do you think defines a good side mount diver?
How long have you got?
As long as you want to take, my friend.
I think at the end of the day, you're looking at a diver. It doesn't matter what form of transport he uses to get from A to B. He still needs to be, or she needs to be confident, competent, understand their equipment and the skills that they should be competent at. Relaxed. Yeah, definitely relaxed is, I think, quite a very prominent part of a diver's ability. You take the relaxing element out of a diver and suddenly you've got everything that you could think of that was worst thing about a diver. So in understanding your equipment and having good skills makes you quite a self-reliant diver. And I don't really like to use that word self-reliant too much because it's not a course that I've ever taught that involves making a diver a solo diver. It isn't about that. It is, however, an ability for a diver to feel comfortable and competent in their own skill sets that allows them to be self-reliant and not expect somebody to help them out. Clearly, you can dive with somebody who's a very competent, good diver and you trust them implicitly, but if you're following a diver, it's not always a good place to be. You feel reliant on them, and if they couldn't for whatever reason, and I've seen circumstances where somebody was just 1 meter away too far and they didn't quite manage to get what they wanted to achieve. So with that comes teamwork as well. So a good side mount diver is somebody that recognizes his good skills and is confident, and they know their equipment very well, and they aren't a hindrance to anybody. So when you were talking before about boat diving, I see a lot of people, and we'll not go down the route of saying side mount versus back mount too much there, because side mount's a bit in the forefront of everyone's mind, and they're watching and carefully scrutinizing everybody, and it's not good. It's supposed to be a fun thing to do, but you can see people that are struggling, and when people are waiting, trying to or having to help out so much all the time, then they just think, do you know what? I could just shove this on my back and off I go. Well, that's sort of true, but not, as I've seen.
I had an interesting experience in Maui, and I tried to arrange DIN valves in the USA, which, as you know, can be a problem from time to time. And so I turned up, and there were no DIN valves. So I had to get a DIN converter, and on the first day I dived single side mount because I only had one DIN converter, and it was a recreational dive, so no big deal. And then on day two, I had a crusty old 10,000 dive guy running the boat, and his first words to me were, "I don't like side mount divers." So I think he was trying to wind me up. So I took the bait. I said, "Hey, why?" And he said, "I just don't like them." And the crux of it was that they were a pain in the ass on his boat. and they held people up and they caused extra work for the crew. And I said, hey, I'm going to make this easy for you. I was confident enough, experienced enough, well-trained enough to be able to deal with it and make sure it wasn't a big deal for him. I think behest on side mount divers to make it easy for people on boats, right? We've got to be well-trained enough, practice our skills so that we can be good on boat.
Well, what skills are there on boats?
Well,
that's any different to anybody else? There isn't anything. You still do the same forward, exit, rolls, whatever. It's understanding your own equipment. If you put something together 20 different ways, you're never going to find the one solution that works perfectly and quickly and effectively for you. So part and parcel is not just jump on the boat the first time you've ever tried side mount, but let's get used to the equipment, how you rig it up. And that's quite a fundamental part of a side mount course, understanding how you rig your equipment up. So every time you put it together, it's the same every time, and you know where it is. Muscle memory becomes quite an important part of any diver's attributes. But whether you're twin set, rebreather, or side mount, it makes no odds. You still need good muscle memory. And to have to look for everything all the time, you can't do that always so much in the water. So that's probably one of the commonest things I've found, which I find in a course is very important to make sure that the students, the divers, they actually understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. One of the things I do is actually teach people how to do it wrong.
So that you can unravel it and show them the right way?
Yeah. So rather than actually teach them to do it wrong, I highlight the implications of doing something wrong. So I always say to people, come on a course, you're here to learn, not prove yourself. So come on, learn, understand, make the mistakes, and understand when we talk about it, why you made those mistakes, what effect it has on you on a particular part of that dive, so you can rectify it yourself when you're not with me. And that goes quite a long way, because somebody does everything right, like monkey see, monkey do. That's great until they don't realize how they've done something. They did it a bit wrong, and they go away and they go, Jesus Christ, what did I do there? and then that haunts them, because they think something's changed. Some gremlins came in the middle of the night and moved something about in their equipment. And
we've all been there.
Yeah.
So we've all got in the water and thought, crap, why is that this way? Hey, we're starting to get a little bit into philosophy around side mount diving and training. Can you share a little bit about your philosophy on training and side mount?
There's one word, and it pretty much covers everything, and that's awareness. Mm-hmm. As you know, I'm a raid instructor trainer, but I've also worked with the other agencies. And one of the things I liked a lot about some training with TDI was the awareness point of it. Global awareness, personal awareness, and situational awareness. And it actually extends much, much further. And one day I am going to write a book about this. You'll probably see it one day. It would be called The Psyche of a Diver. And it's definitely going to encompass every possible element of a diver's mindset and how they perform around it, and what happens when something goes great, something goes wrong, something is a bit different. And the awareness definitely encompasses your equipment, and then your gas usage, and then if you don't want your cylinders to start hitting the roof of a cave as you're bouncing along it, then, streamlining and how they fit in relation to your body. And of course, then you look at things like your distance, your relationship with the cave or the wreck or your buddy, and obviously your depth as well. But one of the biggest things in that is the situational awareness, which is the knock-on effects that happen as a result of either good or poor awareness. Those results are the ones that affect you the most. Mm-hmm. So in teaching people, awareness is absolute king in the whole concept of training. And it doesn't matter whether it's in side mount or back mount, but as I'm a side mount instructor, and this is what I do passionately day in, day out. In fact, I have been known to sleep and talk in my sleep. Teaching my sleep is really something wrong with me. I need my head looking at. So yeah, those are the biggest points in teaching it, and I think that's the most interesting part of teaching for me. Watching divers do everything perfectly is happy days. It's great. I find the challenge is getting into the mind of a diver, if you will, by seeing what they do and how they do it, their expression, their eyes, watching everything and anticipating what they would do, as opposed to just letting them do it and then go, that's wrong. You have to let them make mistakes, and that's what they're there for. And they learn actually very well through those mistakes. And as long as it comes with the understanding of what they did and how they did it, that goes a long way to improve the confidence of a diver. And I'll not forget that again.
It's definitely next level stuff. It's one thing to focus on skills. It's the next thing to bed in skills, build the muscle memory, and then build awareness on top of that. So I agree completely. For our listeners who actually want to improve their skills or improve their diving, what do you think the top 2 or 3 things are that they should do?
Hover. I've always said, if you can hover, you can do anything.
Yep.
Good buoyancy control. I stand up in an audience doing a presentation and I'll ask the audience what the difference between good buoyancy control and a hover is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much what I get. Silence. Yeah. It's very similar, being able to hold your position in the water column using buoyancy control and breath to adjust your position. But the hover is all that without using your hands or feet to compensate for anything. So you actually sit there very motionless, animated in the water. And with that and the ability, you're relaxing and your skills, you can do anything. Yeah. And that's awareness again. So are you aware that your feet are moving? If you're not aware of it, then you need somebody to tell you that they are, and see if you can adjust your trim a little bit more to, if you're in a dry suit, allow a bit more air in your feet. In a wetsuit, it's a little bit different. It's about adjusting weights to the right place, and maybe the harness itself and the tanks, and then putting the buoyancy in the right place that supports the weight.
We're 100% aligned on that. I don't use the term hover, I use the term stability. It's the sum of trim, balance, and buoyancy control. When you've got your weight or the force of gravity that's acting on your body completely balanced by your buoyancy force, and then you're in trim and you're in balance. And as you say, once you've got stability or once you can hover, you can layer skills on top and everything becomes a lot easier than fighting yourself in the water column.
This is it. The way buoyancy control is focused on in everybody's brand new course that they do, it's open water level. The idea of hover with a lot of the teaching is often misguided, overlooked, or poorly trained. And when later on everybody considers it to be buoyancy is the hover that they should have had, it gets very confusing for them. And then when you start talking about the hover, they don't really know what you're talking about. So the best way I've always found to describe the hover is just balance. And it's more critical for us, and you guys are obviously anybody in a dry suit around the world, it's more critical to understand not just how to use your dry suit, but how to dive in your dry suit. And that balance within that dry suit, it's probably the easiest way for a new diver to understand what is this technical word, the hover. It's not, it's balance, that's all it is. And they do get it a lot easier when it's simplified rather than overcomplicating it for them.
So what advice would you give to someone who's new or has just started side mount diving?
So if they're just trying it, knock yourselves out. Well, don't knock yourselves out, but just enjoy it. Have a go, but do it under the auspices of an instructor who can guide you and make sure you're not going to do anything daft. And just sit in the water and just absolutely enjoy it. But if you do decide that it is something that is nice for you, then great, absolutely. Get some instruction, but actually get the instruction that helps you in the water, because there's a lot of guys tend to be quite technically orientated in the brain. We like logistics and we like technical gadgets and everything that just works when they do this, and everything is great when it's set up right. But if you're new to it, then it's not set up right yet, and you need a little bit of guidance. But the guidance is very difficult to obtain when you're sitting on the other end of a keyboard.
Sure.
So once you have got the guidance with the size and shape of a diver, because it's a very personal aspect, side mount does have to fit that diver. It doesn't always fit everybody unless you've adapted your harness to to fit multiple people in a very short space of time. But if this is your harness and that is really the end result, to get the harness that actually fits you, that's great. And then your equipment needs to be fitted onto you, and then you have to dive it in a specific way that allows you to take full advantage of that beautiful trim and balance that you get from side mount. You can still dive at a 45-degree angle in side mount, just like you can do in back mount. But it doesn't necessarily mean you've achieved anything other than have a couple of tanks. And, the impact on the environment is a huge concern. Yes, I'm a cave diver and I understand exactly that sort of impact. But even for the ocean and the floor and everything else that we care so much about is exactly why we teach people to be able to hover and not just dive at 45-degree angle and not have the awareness that, your foot has just knocked over something that took thousands of years to grow.
Well, that concludes part 1 of our interview with Garry Dallas. In our next episode, we'll continue and talk to Garry about cave exploration, about his trip to Newfoundland, and also his experience in working with the SF2 side mount rebreather. All of that coming up in our next episode of Speaking Sidemount. You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, then let us know via our Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.